Good morning, good afternoon to everybody who has joined us here today. Welcome to yet another session of Oracle Apex Office as JPAC series. Today, we are going to explore 5 game-changing features in Oracle Apex 24.2. You might have already seen some of the features, but you'll be surprised to discover some more. Let's dive in. Today's speakers are going to be Santhosh Kumar and Tawfiq Mohammed, who are product managers in the Apex product team. They have some really cool demos lined up for you. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tawfiq.
Thank you, Apurva. Just a quick introduction. My name is Taufeeq. I am Senior Product Manager on the Oracle Apex Product Development team. In today's 5 game-changing features in Oracle Apex session, let us look at what are we going to cover. So what's on the menu today? So we are going to cover these 5 features which were introduced in 24.2. The first feature is database object dependencies. We'll learn how you can use this utility feature, which is in 24.2, to help you get a clear view of what are the different database objects that your applications are dependent on. And then we'll look into the workflow enhancements. As you know, Apex has native workflow engine introduced in Oracle Apex 24.2. We'll look at what are, Oracle Apex 23.2, but we'll look at some of the enhancements we added to workflows in 24.2. And then we'll also look at JSON sources, how you can work with JSON data and how Apex 24.2 is going to make working with JSON data a lot easier. And then Santosh will cover text message enhancements, how we have a different syntax now for text messages, how you can do substitutions and some enhancements we made in that area in 24.2. And then he will also cover Fusion App extensions. All right. Also, if during the sessions, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A. My team is available to help answer these questions. With that, let's dive into the first feature, which is database object dependencies. So what is this feature, right? I'll first give you a background of where you can actually use this feature. Imagine you have a huge application which has references to multiple database objects, multiple packages, functions, database tables, etc. Right now, with this application, you have, let's say, your DBA or someone from your database team, they make some changes to the backend tables. They modify a table, they drop a column, or they modify the package parameters, package procedure parameters, and they remove a parameter, for example. All these changes can lead to uh, your application pages becoming invalid, right? It can lead to invalid SQL code in your applications. Now, when you have a huge application with 200 pages, for example, how will you determine which pages have invalid code? Or in other words, how will you determine which database objects are being used inside an Apex application? This is where this particular utility feature we introduced in 24.2 can help. With this feature, you can easily scan and report database object dependencies in your applications. And you can also visualize these dependencies in a hierarchical tree format, right? And you also get direct links to dedicated references. So I'll show that in demo how you can quickly jump to the reference in which page, which component is a particular table being used or a particular package is being used. You can easily navigate through these direct links. And we also show separate system dependencies. We don't include system dependencies in the custom schema dependencies. We separate out system dependencies. That is also shown in this report separately. And then you also get a filter to search through these dependencies. And then finally, I'll also talk about the Apex App Object Dependency PL/SQL API, using which you can programmatically find out the dependency report, right? You can generate this dependency report not just from the UI, but also from PL/SQL code. So let's say you are deploying your application. So usually deployments happen via CI/CD pipelines, via scripting. So when you are deploying and you want to find out without having to log in into the Apex App Builder, if you want to find out what are the dependencies of my application, and if any errors or if any invalid SQL is there in the currently deployed application, You can find that out using this PL SQL API. You can script around this PL SQL API. I'll show you how this PL SQL API works. Okay, with that, let me show you a quick demo of this feature. Let me shift to the browser. I hope you can see my browser. Let me know if you're not able to see my browser. Uh, so in this application, I have this app which is built for this demo. So once you are inside the application homepage, right, to access the dependency database object dependencies feature, you have to go to utilities. Under utilities, you can find this option database object dependencies, right? You can click on that. I have already scanned this application. Let me clear all dependencies just to show you how it looks. So when you land on this page, this is how it looks. The first time you land on this page. So here you get an option to scan this application, right? You can click on scan and select what type of scan you want. You want full scan, or if you want to only scan for errors, or you want to scan a specific page or entire application, you can perform scan according to whatever you want to do. And now it scans through all the components in the application. It looks and it generates this entire report with database object dependencies. Right now in this application, I don't have any errors, so there are no errors reported. But if you have any errors or invalid SQL code in this application, that will be reported as errors in this hierarchical tree. So here you can see that this application is using these two tables. You can also see which component is using this particular table, right? And you can also look at the type of packages that this application is using, and also the schemas, right? I mean, let's say you want to restrict your Apex applications to only access specific schemas, and accidentally, if your developers, they are referencing objects in a different schema because of during testing, they do that, right? They grant access to different schema objects, then you forget to remove those privileges and those references. You can usually you can easily visualize those dependencies in this database dependency report, right? And if you go to this link, if you click on the link, it takes you to that dependency directly. So you can easily also navigate to that dependency. So that is about this feature. Now talking about the PL SQL API. So if you go to the Apex documentation, right? Let me quickly take you to the documentation. So here is the Apex documentation, and you can see this PL SQL API called Apex App Object Dependency. So if you want to programmatically generate this report or scan your applications, which is the case when you do CI/CD deployments, right? You can use this PL SQL API and go to scan procedure. You get all the information of different views, which you can query to get the results, right? For example, you can query this view, Apex used DB object underscore comp props for all PL SQL and SQL found in the application. Or if you want to only see errors, right? This is the view you can query to see the errors in your application. And how exactly do you run this scan? You just do it in begin and block and pass the application ID, and that application will be scanned. And you also get one more attribute called p underscore options. And these are the different values you can pass. These are different constant values available. You can just say apex underscore app underscore object underscore dependency dot c underscore option all. And this will scan all sources. This will only scan top level dependencies, and this will scan all the packages which have this PL SQL scope defined. So this is how you can use this PL SQL API to also scan using programmatically, or you can also scan using the Apex app builder. That is about this feature. I'm moving back to the second feature, which I like the most and I use it every day, is workflow enhancements, right? So as I said, workflows were introduced in 23.2, and we made few enhancements. So in Apex, we have native workflow engine, as you all know. So in 24.2, what we did is we introduced a new activity type called invoke workflow. Using this invoke workflow activity type, you can invoke one workflow from another. So this helps you easily structure your workflows. And if any particular workflow has to be reused across different workflows, you can create that as a separate workflow and reuse this workflow, right? This particular feature improves the reusability of your workflow so that you don't have to repeat your activities in every workflow. Right? It's common workflow steps. You can create that as a single workflow and then invoke it across different workflows using invoke workflow activity. So an invoke workflow activity has input as well as output parameters. So as part of this feature, we also introduced a new parameter type, which can be in out or out parameter. Right? You can also define parameters which have in out, which can send out information from the invoked workflow. The next enhancement we made for workflows is copying workflow definitions. So you can copy a workflow from one application to other application. And when you're copying a workflow definition, it also copies all its dependencies. I'll show that live, how it copies all the dependencies. For example, a workflow is having a human task create activity. A human task create activity, as you know, depends on task definitions, which are a different shared component, right? So when you copy that workflow from one application to other application, it also copies over the task definitions. So that's an advanced copying feature that you get in 24.2. And then the third feature, which enhancement you get in workflows in 24.2 is resuming suspended workflow at any activity, right? As a workflow administrator, let's say your workflow uh, has faulted or your workflow has to be suspended so that you can make some modifications to the variables. When you suspend a workflow, you may have to resume the workflow after making the modifications, right? So when you resume the workflow in 24.2, you get the flexibility to resume the workflow at any activity. So you as administrator who is aware of uh, the entire workflow semantics, right? You understand what each activity does. So you get the flexibility to decide at which activity you want to resume this workflow. So I'll also show that in demo. And the next enhancement we made for workflows is we are now also supporting club data types for workflow variables and parameters, right? You can have variables and parameters which support club data types, which supports large objects, right? And then we also enhanced the uh, create page wizard, all the pages, the console pages and the task list, unified task list pages that we generate in create page wizard. We also enhance that. So these pages now use template components, menus, and model dialogues, the modern components for easier customization. That's all the enhancements we made in workflows. Let me quickly show you these enhancements in a live demo. Let me shift back to my browser. Back in the browser, let me go to this application. So if I go to this application, as you know, you can access workflows under shared components and go to workflows. So here I have two different workflows created. If I look at the requisition workflow, which is where an employee can log in and request for items, right? So in this workflow, as you can see, it has all these activities. These are all there in 23.2 itself. We have this feature, but then the new feature we added in this release is invoke workflow activity. So as you can see in this workflow, we are creating a requisition. We are sending that requisition to up for approval. If the amount is greater than 1,000, if the amount is not greater than 1,000, then it automatically raises an order. So order is a different workflow altogether. Handling order is a different workflow in this application, right? So I have a workflow dedicated for handling orders, which creates an order, approves an order, and does all the other tasks which the order workflow should take care of. Now I want to invoke this order workflow under requisition workflow. That is what I'm doing here. So I have this invoke order workflow activity. You can check here. The activity type is invoke workflow. This is the new activity type introduced in 24.2. So with this activity type, I can now invoke other workflows defined in this application. So here I get an option to select which workflow I want to invoke, right? And then you can also pass parameters. As you can see, the order workflow has all these parameters defined. Item amount. These are all in parameters, and we also have an out parameter called order ID. So once an order is created, that order ID, I want to pass it back to the parent workflow, right? I want to pass the information back. So I can also have an out parameter or in out parameter in this example to send that information, the order ID back to the calling workflow. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm invoking this order workflow, and I'm also capturing the out parameter into a version variable, order underscore ID. So in this way, you can invoke a workflow and not just invoke a workflow from other workflow, but also transfer data using in parameters. I'm sending the data from parent workflow to the child workflow, and using out parameter, I'm capturing the data that is coming from the that is being sent by the order workflow, the child workflow, right? This is how you can use uh, invoke workflow activity type to invoke different workflows. And also, let me show you a quick demo of this, how this workflow functions. So here I am in my uh, requisitions page. I can create a requisition here. Okay, let me sign in once again. So here I am raising a requisition for MacBook Pro. And if I go to admin workflows, I can see this new workflow is triggered. And here you can see that this workflow is in progress, right? Now, let's say I, as an administrator, I can see that the item value is 3000, close to 3000, but I realize that this is a mistake and the item value is actually only 999, 999, right? So, why, as an administrator, what I do, I can suspend this workflow and I can update this workflow variable. I can modify this to 999. Now, if the value is less than 999, as you know, from the workflow, it doesn't require an approval on requisition, right? So I want to retrigger the workflow in such a way that it doesn't require this approval on requisition, right? So now when I resume this, I also get this flexibility to choose under which activity, from which activity I want to resume this workflow. So here I can see the diagram as well. So here the activity is now currently waiting on approve requisition, but as the amount is now changed, I can retrigger the workflow from any activity before or after, right? I can simply, I know that the activity has to directly go to order workflow. So I can select invoke order workflow and click on resume, right? The workflow is resumed and it creates an order workflow. So if I refresh this page, 1 second, here you can see one more workflow is created, order workflow. Now, if I open this, now you can see the diagram that the approved requisition, which it was waiting earlier, now got terminated. And now because the amount changed, it doesn't require the approval. And because I resumed it at the invoke order workflow, now it is currently waiting on this particular workflow to be completed. And as you know, this is a different workflow altogether. You can see that instance here. It is now working on this particular workflow. And because this is a child workflow, you also get easy navigation from the child workflow to the parent workflow. I can also go to the parent workflow details here and click on this activity, and it takes me to the details of this child workflow, where you can see this child workflow is triggered and it is now waiting for approval. And I can also navigate back to the parent workflow from here. So you also get easy navigation as an end user to navigate from child workflow to parent workflow, as we discussed, the resume activity, where you can resume a suspended workflow at any activity you want. For example, I want to resume this workflow when it is suspended to an activity which is above this step, right? For example, I want to start the entire workflow again. I can simply resume it by selecting the start and clicking on resume, right? So you can choose any activity downstream as well as upstream the current activity where it is suspended, right? That is about the workflow enhancements. And the one final enhancement that we made is copying the workflow, right? So as I said, you can also copy a workflow between applications. Now, let's say I have this application which does not have any workflows. So now let's say I want to copy that order workflow over to this application. So I can go to workflows. I can click on copy from other app. I can select that application and I can select which workflow I want to copy. I can give it a name, click on copy workflow. And now it copied this workflow. Along with this workflow, if you go to shared components, it also copied task definitions. That's because this order workflow is dependent on this task definition. If you look at this order workflow, it has this human task create activity, which is referencing this task definition approve order. So because there is a dependency, when I copied this workflow, it also copied its dependency, the task definition as well. So these are the enhancements we made in 24.2 for workflows. Going back to my final feature, which is JSON data sources. In Apex 24.2, you can now work with JSON data sources seamlessly. So what you can do with this feature is that you can create a JSON-based data source in shared components. Let's say you have your JSON data stored somewhere. You need not parse the JSON, flatten it out, and store it separately. So typically what happens is if you are invoking any REST API, right, the response from the REST API comes as a JSON object. So if you want to display that JSON response in a classic report or interactive report, for example, as you know, classic report and interactive report, they expect the data to be in two-dimensional format in rows and columns. Now you will have to flatten this JSON response, parse it, and then extract the attributes and then store it temporarily, maybe in a collection, and only then you would then display the data in a classic report or interactive report, right? That is pre 24.2. In 24.2, you need not flatten it. You need not store the data anywhere. You can directly define a data source where you define how the logic you want to use to parse this JSON object, and then use this data source as a source to your classic report or interactive report. So Oracle Apex auto converts the JSON and including nested structures. It can also handle nested JSON objects, and it converts that JSON objects into rows and columns for you using data profiles. And once you have this JSON source defined, you can use this in your reports, charts, as well as forms to display the data in these components. And these JSON data sources also support DML operations, wherein you can also update from a form. Let's say you are displaying the JSON in the form of a form in page items. You can also update the form, and that will directly update the JSON object. So this also takes Apex also takes care of the DML operations. Additionally, you can also perform DML operations using the Apex underscore exec package. So you can integrate these JSON data sources also with automations, list of values, report queries, etc. Right? This is how you can use JSON sources. Let me quickly show you a live demo to give you a clear understanding of what this feature is. So in this application, what I have is, let me go and show you the data source which I'll be using. So if I go to object browser, I have a JSON table where I have all the purchase order information in this JSON format. And you can see all these JSON objects. You can imagine this information is something we fetch from external data sources via REST, for example. So all this information is coming in. Now I don't have to parse this and store it in a separate table, right? I don't have to do that. What I can do in Apex, let's say I want to display this. If I go back to my application, I click on JSON sources, we log in. So this data, I can display it in form of list and reports. Whatever JSON data that you see here, I was able to parse it, or in other words, Apex is able to parse it and display this in the form of rows and columns. Now, how do I do this? If I go back to this application, as you know, I have the JSON data in my table, right? So what I can do is I can go to shared components and then create a JSON source. You can see the JSON sources under data sources. I created a JSON source on top of my JSON table. If you look at it here, I have a JSON data source here. And here I have this JSON source, which is referencing this table, which has my JSON object. So here I can also define a data profile, which tells Apex how to parse this JSON object, right? For example, I'm getting the shipping instructions column from this selector in the JSON. Shipping instructions dot name. This is where it is getting the shipping instructions uh, name column. Similarly, it is also getting the city and the state from the shipping instructions dot address dot state path in the JSON object. So this is how you can define the path which Apex has to use to retrieve this information and construct that in form of rows and columns. So once this data profile is defined, I can now reference that in my application pages. If I go here, you can see this classic report, for example, which is showing the line items, is referencing. So here under location, along with the local database and REST-enabled SQL as source, you also get the JSON source as a location type, and you can select the JSON source that you have defined under shared components, right? And this works same as a normal table, a local table. Similarly, if I show you this form, right, I'm also able to display the same JSON in the form of a form layout. If I look at the form definition, let me go to page number 70, and this has this form. Again, this form is also based on JSON data source, right? This form also can perform DML operations, right? Basic DML. So if I go back to my application and let's say modify this to, let's say, topic, a small modification, and click on apply changes, this also updates the JSON object. So to verify that, I can take you back to the shared, to the application, to object browser. So this, I can show you that in the, even in the backend table, can filter for a specific keyword. So I need to search for Abanda and 2040. Mm, 0103. Okay, once I filter with this, I can see this object, and inside this object, you can see that even the address is also changed based on the modifications we made. This is all handled, is what I wanted to show you, that you can also perform DML on top of these JSON objects directly using the native form DML operations. That's all about my features. I'll next pass it on to Santhosh to take up the next two features.
Thank you, Tawfiq. Okay, so I'll be covering two topics. One is with respect to the enhancements for text message and then the Fusion extensions using Apex 24.2. So to start with, in text enhancements, we have two types of enhancements basically. One is with respect to how you can use text messages. Earlier, we used to use a positioning variable like percentile 0, percentile 1, and then we used to provide the whatever percentile 0 is referring to, and that's actually a troublesome process because if the variable positioning changes, you will not be able to display it. So that's an enhancement which we have come up with as part of 24.2. And the second one is with respect to the multi-language thing. Multi-language thing is where, for example, if you are using any other language where the direction of text changes from left to right or right to left, we used to do that manually by writing a JavaScript code. With 24.2, we don't have to do that. That is inbuilt. This usually is taken care as part of our Fusion extensions thing, because in Fusion, you will be having the direction of the data from left to right and right to left. So that has been handled as part of this. So this is a sample application which we have built. And here I'll try to showcase both the features. One is with respect to the text message enhancements using the substitution parameters, and then regarding this language part. So this is a static content row which I have created. And here for text message enhancements, I have done two things. One, I have created a static content region, and then this is a page item. So whenever I click on any record, it is automatically updating it. It is just saying, welcome the username, whoever has logged in. The employee you have selected is Blake because I have clicked on Blake, and then it is showing the designation of Blake. Similarly, I'm displaying another kind of message, which is coming from a page item. Now, when I change the language, and let us say I want to see the data of what happens when I click on Clark, it is updating it. So it is doing a translation as well. And then I'll show how this is done. So for this, what we have done is, so this is a page item checkbox, a radio button item which we have taken where I'm fetching the language. And then this is a static region where I have provided a welcome message. So if you see here, this is my text message which I have used. Welcome underscore message is my text message which I have used, where I'm passing the app user. That's where you see welcome low code, and then employee, where I'm passing the parameter, and then designation. Now let us see how this is coming. For that, I'll go to shared components, and under text messages, let me take a duplicate tab. So as you can see here, this is a welcome message which I've created, welcome percentile user. So unlike before where we used to give a positioning variable percentile 0, I'm saying it should be user and then it should be employee and then a designation. And the other thing, I have done the same thing for two more languages which I have been using. And then whenever you try to do this, you select the, rather than fetching the positional variable, I've given it as a percentile, so I'm passing value for those. So user is a percentile user which I have passed in the text messages. Similarly, employee is the percentile employee which I have passed in my text message when I defined it, and similarly the designation. So this is one way where I have created it as a static content. Now there is another way, which is why I have page item. So how does it work? So this is how it is. So what I have done is, there is a PL SQL API for that, which is your get underscore message, apex underscore lang dot get message. Here I can tell what is the text message ID which I have created, and then whatever parameters I have to pass for the text message. Parameters are nothing but the percentile variables which you have created. So I have selected that and I have passed it. So if you see here, underscore P1 message that I am fetching via dynamic action. Just a minute. So as you can see here, I have a different message, welcome message 01, and I'm passing employee and designation. If you search for this, so it's showing hello, good morning. The employee you have selected is percentile employee, who is a designation. So that's what I'm passing there. And these are the two parameters which I need for this particular text message. And I'm passing that. The result I'm storing in the P1 message variable. And on the P1 message, I just say, all I have to do is I can come down here and I have to give it. So to provide this, you don't have to do anything. If you enable, go to your tools, show and enable text message picker, you will get this option. When you click on this, and if you select, for example, welcome message 1, it automatically populates. For example, let us say you didn't have any of this. Just click on this and then select it. It will populate everything for you. And here you have to replace this with whatever is the page item which is holding your employee and designation. Okay, so that is on this. So this is coming from your static content and this is coming from our page item. Now with respect to the languages, as I have mentioned, this is for French. Now similarly, when I convert it into Arabic and I say Blake, the data will be updated and it will convert your data into, just a minute, it's okay. I've created a dynamic action for submit page, so it's refreshing it. But ideally, when you select Arabic, as you can see, the direction has changed. So this has been taken care internally. So we don't have to create a JavaScript again to change the direction of the language. So that is with respect to text messages enhancements. The other one which I want to showcase is with respect to the Fusion application integrations. As you all know, with 24.2, we have made Fusion extensions with Apex easy in just 3 steps. The first step is where you'll create a database connection with the OCI UC tenancy where your SaaS is hosted, and that database connection would be with your Apex database. The second step is where you'll be creating a connection between your SaaS or Fusion and Apex, where you'll get the option called as integrate Apex with Fusion applications. The third one is where you create a application using a static create wizard. So this is an option you will be getting. Once you do that, what happens is it will create an authentication scheme for you and it will create it with a default REST API. So this is a sample application which we have created, and my intention is not to show here as to how to get the data from Fusion, that you would have seen it prior as well. So what I wanted to show here is these are a couple of APIs which I've used to get the data from Fusion. Now, what if I want to get the data from Fusion and I want to run a workflow on top of that? Now, for example, let us say these are all the workers which are present in my Fusion. Okay. Now, let us say I want to fetch a certain worker, and I want to initiate couple of trainings for this worker. This is a data which I am getting from HCM. HCM also has trainings where you can assign a training to an employee. What if you have a requirement where these trainings are not present in HCM? These trainings are actually outside HCM. That's where you can use Apex. You can create a workflow. In my case, I have provided two buttons here. So this basically is making an API call. This button is making an API call to Fusion and getting me the details of this particular person. And I'm assigning the trainings to a particular worker based on the worker type. For example, you see it has E here. So if I go to training list, here I have a couple of courses which I have added based on the worker type. So if it is worker type is E, then these are all the courses which it has to assign. If it is C, these are the courses which it has to assign. And if it is P, it has to assign this particular learning course. Okay, now back to here. Now what I can do is when I click on initiate worker trainings, this will initiate a workflow for me. Now if I go back to my workflow and go to workflow console, I can see that I have initiated workflow for the low code user, and I have built a very small workflow just to showcase the capability of Apex with Fusion. So this is where this is waiting on a human task where I can either accept or reject. When I accept, it will go via an automatic assignment of training. When I reject it, it will go via the manual path where I have to manually assign trainings. Now, before accepting or rejecting, so this is an assigned trainings which using which you will be able to assign trainings to a worker manually. I'll show both the cases. Now, for now, I'll accept it so that it will take the automatic route. I'll approve it. Now, when I go back to my workflows, I can say it is completed. And then I'm also sending a push notification. So as you can see, trainings are assigned for that particular for that particular user, which is low code. And you can see I have a push notification received. And now this is the person, right? Low code. Now, if I go back to employee trainings, this is the person for which I have initiated the trainings now. So this is the data which I'm maintaining in my local. So here I'm not getting the entire data from Fusion. Whatever you see here under workers, the data, whatever you're seeing is the data which I'm getting using a REST API. Whereas here, I'm not storing this entire data. I'm only storing the person number. And once the workflow is triggered and once trainings are assigned, I'm only storing this data. So from Fusion, these are the four fields which I am getting. And these are the fields which I have created in my local. These are the trainings data which is present in my local. Okay, so this is one way. The second way is where, let us say I have another user. Just give me a moment. Okay, now let us say for this particular worker, I want to initiate trainings. Now, when I run this, I have this worker where I have two worker types for this. One is P and one is E. And now when I initiate the worker trainings, so how many should I see? There should be one for P and four for E. Now, if I go back to my workflow, I'll say approve. And when I go back here, I can see that there are 5 trainings assigned, one with P and 4 with E. Okay, now similarly, let us say I want to initiate it for another worker. Rather than doing it as a manual one, I'll automated one, I'll try to do it as an assigned one, where I'll assign the trainings manually. I can select the worker type and I can initiate the training. Then when I come here, I can see that it is initiated for this employee. So this is just one use case which we are trying to explore, or you can try to explore using Apex with Fusion. And there are multiple other use cases which you can try. So with 24.2, we have made building extension with Fusion ease. So that would be pretty much from my side. If there are any other questions, we are happy to take it up. I'll hand it over to Shailu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santosh, and thank you so much, Taufik, for such a interesting session on the game-changing feature of Apex 24.2. We have few questions in the Q&A. I would like to. Is it possible to have end-to-end session on these extensions? Okay, so we will take it up. You can just mail us.
Okay, let me answer the first one. Can we create a multilingual application that adapts to different regions? So you'll be able to do it. So as I mentioned, so if you want to, you can create a multilingual application. All you need to do is for your entire application, you have to get a translatable file. For example, you want to convert it into French. You need to get an XLF file, which will be in French, and then you have to upload it. And then you have to seed that translatable file so that your application will be working both with English as well as French. And can we see the JavaScript to change the direction to RTL? So that is embedded within Apex, so you'll not be able to access that part, but it would be similar to the JavaScript which we used to write earlier to convert the direction from right to left and left to right. Is it possible to have an end-to-end session on this extensions? We can definitely plan on this. You can reach out to us and we can schedule one for this.
Thank you, Santosh. So as we are at the end of the session, so before we wind up the session, we have something for you. So if you have any idea regarding any application, or if you're working on any new innovation for Apex application, you can just submit to us at apex.oracle.com/go/ideas. We would love to hear you. And we are coming up with a big event, that is JPAC Low Code Summit, and which is happening in Namma, Bengaluru, and which is mostly happening in the month of August. So stay tuned for us. We will be sharing more details. And yes, if you are new to Apex, or if you want to brush up more skills on Apex, please go to apex.oracle.com/go/trainings. There you will find lot of certification. You can do Apex Foundation certification, professional, and you can get certified. And the big advantage is that we are offering this certification free of cost till May 15th. So go and grab it. And if you are a partner, or if you are helping any customer to build innovative apps, or if you are seeking any help in Apex, or if you have any ideas for the next JPEG hours, or if you have any queries, please reach out to us at the email ID which is given below. We'll definitely help you all in that. And if you have missed any of the office hours, or if you want to see any of the replays, so you can definitely do it in our YouTube playlist, that is apex.oracle.com/go/playlist/jpack. That's all from our side today. Have wish you a very good day ahead, and we'll see you in the next JPEG hours. Thank you.